everybody. Welcome to Growing Up Geek, the weekly podcast for geek entertainment and nostalgia. My name is Brad, and I am joined, as always, by my brother Matt.
Hello.
This week, we're going to talk about the first trade paperback of a comic book called Y: The Last Man. And this is a comic book that is written by Brian K. Vaughan, is illustrated by his co-creator, who is Pia Guerra, and it has gotten a lot of critical acclaim lately, and it actually won a Eisner Award, which is a comic award for American comics. So it's one that I was looking forward to reading. The storyline essentially takes place in a fictional 2002 in which all of the males spontaneously die of mysterious causes. And this not only includes men, of course, but also male animals. Any mammal with a Y chromosome essentially dies. That includes embryos and even sperm. So that is the setup of this book, and that is pretty depressing if it ended there, but there is an exception.
It's only depressing in as much as if you died versus if you were the last man.
Exactly, and obviously there would not be a book unless there was the last man, who is a character named Yorick, and he is an escape artist, an amateur escape artist, and he has a monkey, because of course every comic book needs a monkey.
Absolutely.
And he's a sidekick, and his monkey is male as well. So there are two exceptions to this worldwide catastrophe that happens, and that is Yorick and his monkey, whose name is Ampersand. And so that is where the story picks up. And Matt, what did you think of this book? You've read a lot more of it, obviously, than I have.
Yeah, I'm further into the series, and it was definitely one of those comics that I picked up the first trade, and just about as soon as I finished it the very next day, I went out to my local comic book retailer and picked up the next several trades and plowed through them, relatively quickly after that. And now I'm left waiting for, I think, what's probably the last trade left to come out before the series ends. Every time I'm in the store, I see the single issues, and I'm tempted to pick them up and start reading them. I really enjoy the way the story reads. There's a lot of interesting characters beyond just Yorick himself. There's some strong female leads, of course there has to be, because it's a book of most...
There's only women left in the world, essentially.
Exactly. But it's well thought out. It deals with political systems and how they react. It takes a good look at a lot of the different facets beyond just like the only one left to repopulate the species kind of thing.
Right.
It doesn't go for just that. What did you think?
I liked it. It's the kind of thing that every teenage boy thinks of. This question of, what if I was the last man on Earth?
Sure.
And I know I thought about that as a kid. And normally it ends with something like, all of the women throwing themselves at me or something. That's sort of where this book picks up, is what would actually happen were that to take place.
Right.
So I'm definitely intrigued by that storyline. I'm interested in a world where there literally is only one male left, and it's a world full of women. How would it change?
Yeah.
This is possibly going to sound bad, but I wasn't quite buying how strong all of the female characters are. I understand certainly that within the female circle, the spectrum, as it were, there are women who are very strong, and there are women who are more easy to crumble. This book, at least in the first trade, only showed, in my opinion, the stronger side.
Right.
There are Republican women with shotguns.
Right.
There is a biker gang, an Amazon biker gang.
Yeah.
There's a tough garbage truck driver. And I'm just listing, a couple of the characters. None of these women really exhibit much fear in what has happened, and I felt that was a little bit unrealistic. I think, in my opinion, and of course this is probably going to get me beaten down by a lesbian biker gang, but and they set up in the story that it's not lesbians, it's just Amazon, which is like an interesting return back to something very tribal.
Right. These women go as far as cutting off one of their breasts.
Right. Yep.
So
And that's there. I mean, they definitely committed to that in the comic. I was like, oh, they went there. I'm looking forward to seeing whether the book introduces us to some less tough characters. I like some of those characters, but I would love to see the spectrum, as I said before.
And I'd say that it, having read further than you, it definitely goes there. You definitely have, eventually in the comic, there's the points where you have some women who have learned to survive only by relying off of other women. There's probably a lot of women that have joined the Amazons because of the otherwise total chaos that they find their lives in. So the comic does, volume by volume, it goes on to explore a pretty wide range of those ideas,
Okay.
including that it eventually gets kind of self-referential.
Interesting.
When they when they have a group of women who are filmmakers trying to make a movie about the last man on Earth.
Interesting. It's funny because when you set up the premise of this book for someone and you say it's about the last man on Earth, people picture I Am Legend. People
Sure.
picture Omega Man or something where
they
it's
don't
literally...
get that. Yeah, all
Right.
the women are still there. Yeah.
No, all the women are still there. This is really a book, I think, largely about women. The artist here is female too, and she's the co-creator. And I wonder if she had an input. I'm
Sure.
sure she did. And Brian K. Vaughan, I think, is a very talented writer. I was really thrilled with The Pride of Baghdad, which you gave me.
Absolutely.
In a sort of a stack of things that you gave me. I read that on one Saturday morning. It was
Mm-hmm.
by my bed, and it just sort of rolled over like, oh, let's see how this is. Cracked it
Yeah.
open and didn't stop all the way through until the end. And if people are listening and they want a good read, and they're not used to comics, that to me is very non-traditional, but very good as well.
The Pride of Baghdad is like a mature version of the Lion King, almost.
Essentially, just on the subject of Brian K. Vaughan there.
Right.
The bottom line for me is basically I'm intrigued and I'm looking forward to seeing where it's going.
Sure. The other nice thing is knowing that it will be coming to an end and that it is a finite series. Eventually, we discover how it is that he ended up surviving what killed everyone else. Was it some kind of mystical voodoo that wiped out all men? Was it some kind of plague that did it?
Right.
There's a lot of good open-ended questions. One of the other interesting elements is that he has a girlfriend who's overseas, so he has no way of getting to her realistically.
Right.
He's also trying to hide the fact that he's a man because generally he's finds himself in all manner of trouble when people realize that there's a man among them.
Right.
Most women don't deal well with the surprise.
Yeah, it's interesting because that's the moment where, as a teenager, where I always imagined that, you would reveal yourself to a group of women and they would say, "Oh, a man," just run towards you.
Uh-huh.
In this
Yeah.
comic, the very first revelation that he gives, it's I won't give it away, but it's a very different reaction. And so all of that kind of trying to make it what would really happen is in there. And I do like that, and I'm anxious to see where it goes. You mentioned that it's a finite series. It is coming to an end with its 60th issue. And Brian K. Vaughan has actually said that he intended this as a finite series. He set it up as a 5-year run, 60 issues, and then it's over. And to my mind, that sounds like a very advantageous thing for a writer because the level of threat that you can raise and the sort of the new reader that you bring in can really benefit from having a finite series. And I wanted to posit the question to you is a finite series better than a continuing series, do you think?
That's one of those interesting things I can remember as a kid when you would find that little tagline on your comic book's cover somewhere, an ongoing monthly series or a limited monthly series. There's also the comic book one-shot where a comic book is basically only one issue.
Right, like Pride of Baghdad.
Like Pride of Baghdad, exactly. But I would say as a kid, I always kind of wanted it to go on. I was into the idea of an unlimited series. I liked the idea that X-Force or X-Men or Spider-Man, that there would always be another issue. As I've gotten older, I've come to prefer a sense of closure, I think.
Yeah.
And
we don't have that much time left.
Exactly. There's so many hours in the day. There's something to knowing that the character development is going to go somewhere. And I think when you have an unlimited series, say Superman, which is just going to go on until it can't, it's like how much can Superman really evolve? And when he does, the industry makes a big deal out of it, like, oh, he's getting a new uniform or something like that.
Right.
Spider-Man, I guess, just recently separated from Mary Jane through some kind of circumstances or other. But more or less, it's these incidental. It's like how do we change them without changing them too much because we want it to go on forever. I don't appreciate that as much as I used to.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up Superman and characters like X-Men because they sort of have an excuse for being this old and still looking the way that they do.
Right.
Superman is an alien and Wolverine has a healing factor. And I used to hear that as a kid. It was always on the back of the trading card. He's 80 years old, but his healing factor keeps him looking young.
Yeah.
And that works for him. But what about Spider-Man? And what about Mary Jane? And what about some of these characters who literally, they got married, the Fantastic Four, in like the 60s? It almost makes it seem silly sometimes. It's like, how long has this person been alive?
Sure. Yeah, when Spider-Man has gone through nearly 4 decades now.
And he's still a teenager.
Yeah, he's still a young fella.
He just has a really exciting week.
Exactly.
There's another option, actually, which someone at work suggested, which is if you've ever seen the comic strip For Better or For Worse. I don't know if you remember, it was like a mom and a dad and some kids, and they actually grew up over time. The kids became adults and became parents.
Oh, wow.
And the original parents are in an old folks' home and are now facing death at this point in the comic.
Wow.
And so it actually aged the characters. I would think that would be a good suggestion for modern comics as well, is, you know what? What would happen if Peter Parker starts to get old and deals with middle age and things like that, It might be interesting. But yeah, like you said with closure, these stories will end. And again, something like this, you can hand to somebody and say, here, this is literally only 60 issues and you're done.
Exactly. It certainly explores all different kinds of psychologies of women who are surviving, including ones that begin to try to make a living by impersonating men. For the sake of lonely women who miss men. So
right.
And I think that, the comic book, it's once all men are dead, I think we pick up like a month or so later.
There is a period, I think 40-something days.
About 40 days. So that's enough time for women to get a hold of themselves.
Right.
I would know from my experience with women that after enough time they get their crap together and they get to work. So
there you go. And on that pleasant note.
Yeah.
So if we have any female listeners left after this and you would like to send us an email, you may do so. Our email address is mail@growing-up-geek.com. Send us your geeky memories and let us know if there's any comics that you're reading that you would like to recommend. Thank you for listening. My name is Brad.
And this is Matt.
And we'll see you later.
Take care.